Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Arrow. So this week's episode picks up right where last week's episode left off with, obviously, they're like, oh, where's Chase's location? It's here. And then the computer explodes. Picking up right there, we end up finding out that basically it was an EMP. Basically, they're stuck in a bunker. Situation's even worse because the chip inside of Felicity's back, I mean, obviously, that helps her walk and everything, stops working, so her legs are no longer working. Which did, because I completely forgot about that. I was like, it's not until she made a reference, I'm like, oh yeah, my legs, yeah, I think I'm stuck and can't move. Or, like, she was saying, like, yeah, she can't move. And then it was like, Oliver was talking, I was like, all right, her legs got messed up last season, didn't they? I didn't notice the whole chip situation. And then immediately after, Oliver's like, okay, so she's like, yeah. That affected even my chip. What that means, like, yeah, I can't walk. I was like, dude, like, perfect time to remember that, I guess. I mean, still, overall, very sucky situation. So basically, the entire episode is them forced to kind of, obviously, we know that their relationship is very awkward at this point in time. I mean, granted, it's been a little awkward before now, but it's in a particular situation where it's like they're having the fight about, oh, whether, you know, the other trusts them or not. Because obviously, Oliver's made his defense of like, do not end up like me. I don't want you to become like me. That's why I'm telling you to stay away from all these things. Why I'm telling you not to make the decisions that you're making, working with a group like Helix and stuff like that. Which, once again, even she doesn't 100% know all there is to know about him. She kind of defending, like, letting someone like Kaden out. It's like, oh yeah, he's a hacker. That's all. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you don't know if that's all there is to him. I mean, just because someone's a hacker doesn't mean they can't be a very bad person. Let's not forget who your dad is. Your dad, in some circles, might just be considered a hacker, but I mean, I could have sworn, I might be remembering it wrong, but wasn't the whole thing about the fact is that he murdered people? That he actually killed someone or people? I don't know if it was plural or not, I don't remember, but nevertheless, so it's like, don't discount hackers and stuff like that, but yeah, obviously, like, each one of them, they're trying to find their way out of the bunker, obviously, each having their own approach. Obviously, Oliver has his, like, oh, I'll go up the elevator shaft. Doesn't work because Adrian put a trap there. He falls and gets poked through the side of looked like it might have been by some rebar, or it kind of looked almost like rebar-ish, but maybe it's not. But nevertheless, it got him good. Which Felicity, you know, tries her approach, which doesn't work either. And basically, there's methane gas kind of leaking in. I guess the main focus, because at first it's kind of like, oh, maybe I should listen to Felicity, because Felicity has an idea. She kind of warned Oliver ahead of time that, oh, the room might be booby trapped, but he didn't want to listen. And so now it's kind of like, oh, maybe you should listen. I was like, oh, even my idea didn't work out. It's a situation where it's like, they're not 100% in sync and working together. I mean, it kind of coincides with the flashback where you have them, like, this is kind of basically taking place between season 4 and the beginning of season 5, that point where Team Arrow was kind of split up and Oliver's kind of handling things on his own, obviously getting back up from Felicity and as well as Curtis. Curtis kind of easily picks up on the fact it's like, oh, Oliver, I mean, obviously, like, he's like, you, Felicity and Oliver, it's like, oh, obviously you both, like, still have shown feelings for each other. You want to be with each other the way you're staring at each other so longingly. Like, I haven't noticed that. He even tries to set it up with, leaving them with Chinese food and wine and just making an excuse like, oh, I'm going to go hang out with Paul. Like, I've got a date with Paul or whatever. The fact is that obviously Felicity brings out the fact is it's not even necessarily William in a sense, like he kept the secret about William. It's like, no, it's the fact of the matter is that William is just one of many examples of the fact is that Oliver doesn't open up to her. Kind of something I brought up yesterday, kind of about the whole Joe and Cecile situation. For you to really, like, that's what anyone wants when it comes to love in a relationship, is for you to be open with them. You know, even if you're not open, what she realizes he's not open with a lot of people, but at the very least, if we're in this relationship and we're supposed to be important and always kind of be there for each other, it's like, then let me in, let me know what's there, what you're feeling and stuff like that. But obviously, it's like, he kept saying like, William is secret, along with a lot of other stuff, a secret, so that's what bothered her so much. It's like, you know, it's like, because in her eyes, it's like, Oliver doesn't trust me. And that's something that obviously continues to this day, because it's like, you know, with this whole situation, it's like, you couldn't back my play. I've backed everything that you've done, even if I didn't 100% agree with it. Why? Because, you know, that's what it means to kind of be in this whole, like, partnership type of thing of like you always have each other's back. You may not always agree, but you're always supposed to have each other's back. Like it's so interesting because it leaves you conflicted because you're like you understand where they're coming from, and it's like where both sides are coming from. It's a situation where it's like different perspectives. It's like I don't know, like it's really hard to like. It's very hard to say that there's a clear right and wrong. Obviously, you have ideas of it like yeah. You might in your mind be like, oh, one person's more right than someone else. But it's like, I've still stuck by the idea of like, I understand where Oliver's coming from about like not wanting Felicity to be more like him and stuff like that. Kind of not making the same mistakes that he does. But it eventually leads to a very honest conversation where Oliver tells her about basically why he disbanded Team Arrow. And then it clicked in my head. I was like, right. The only person he actually told was Diggle, the whole like, oh, enjoying killing thing. I forgot, like the only person that really knows that is Diggle. Because I was like, I guess in my mind, like afterwards, I just assumed he told everyone else. But it's like, no, the only person that knows that truth is Diggle. But obviously Diggle's not going to tell anyone, especially Felicity, because it's like, yeah, that's Oliver's decision. It has to be Oliver who ends up telling her, as well as the rest of the team if he's willing to. It has to be him. So if not, then what's the whole point, And he tells that to her, and it's like, that's what he doesn't trust. He's always trusted Felicity, but he doesn't trust himself. And so it's a situation of like, I guess more so than anything, it's like there's a part of him that would agree with what her plans. Like some of her plans, maybe it's like, yeah, part of me would obviously want to back you up, but it's like I can't trust myself to back you up because it's like if I'm saying I should back you up, maybe it's not necessarily a good idea. It's like for him, it's like he has a hard time deciding what's right and wrong. I mean, because like obviously Felicity's like, oh, obviously Chase got inside your head and everything. He's like, no, he didn't. This is something I've just been running from this entire time. It's something that was, as we know, that was something brought up by Anatoly in the past, like when he was in Russia. Part of the Bratva and everything. It's like that was something Anatoly brought up. Like the fact of the matter is, you enjoy the killing and stuff like that. Which he was, at the time he was like, no, I don't. But now he's come to realization maybe he does. But for Felicity, she looks at it in a very different light. She looks at it as a situation of like, no, you're not a bad person. Like, I know you, Oliver. The fact of the matter is you're the way you are now. It isn't because you enjoy killing. You went through hell for 5 years and then you're having to fight all these bad guys and being so close to the darkness for another 5 years. It's enough to make anyone a little crazy. But the fact of the matter is, even through it all, you're still good. But even then, Oliver's like, he's still been struggling with the whole situation, like not knowing who he is. Because don't forget, like he's pushed himself away from the Green Arrow hood and mask because it's like to him, it's like I don't have the right to. I'm not that person who's right to wear that mask and wield those arrows just because like what the Green Arrow represents, he can't fill that role. But now even it's just Oliver, like, it's always been the problem, like, struggling between Oliver Queen and who he became on Lian Yu and finding that balance. And, it seemed like more often than not that Oliver Queen was a disguise and that being a hood was who he really was. And now it's like, with that all kind of coming back to, like, bite him, because of the whole Prometheus situation, it leaves him just confused on who he really is. But, in the hospital where it's like Felicity's like a lot more understanding. She's like, she realizes she goes back and she goes like, I realized that what I was doing, as I brought up last time, was like what she was doing was mainly out of revenge for Billy. It's like she was so mad about Billy dying and being killed because of Prometheus' schemes that she wanted to get him at any cost. And it's like, yeah, like that Oliver was right. Like, I don't want to end up like him. It's like, I didn't realize how close I was to that edge. Like, that I wasn't necessarily even doing it like, oh, for the right reasons of stopping Chase. It's like, I just wanted to, get him, not for the justice sake, but just, like I brought up before, like the whole sense of like revenge, so she's like, I know how I feel to a small extent. I've gone through what you've gone through, having to deal with that, like feeling like you're right in your approach in a certain situation, but kind of looking back in retrospect and being like, hey, maybe I wasn't right. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, it's such a hard situation because it's like, this is about going after Chase, but the fact of the matter is, like, once again, we don't really know that much about Helix. It's not like we necessarily know enough to be like, hey, they can be trusted. At the same time, you don't know, you don't, like, Oliver has a right to, like, he's not trying to be a hypocrite, which I like. I see where people can come off being like, oh yeah, he's being a hypocrite, but it's not being a hypocrite. It's being like, learning from my experience, I've done so much wrong over all this time, and it's like I don't want people to kind of fall into that same, pattern of making mistakes like I do. The fact is that that whole like Chase conversation kind of awakened his eyes to kind of look at things from a different perspective, to kind of take that step back and not just be so willing to give into that monster, I guess. Whether or not that monster is the real him or not. Obviously, you want to give him the benefit of the doubt. It's like, no, dude, deep down, like, you're a hero. Maybe that was who you were then, but that's definitely not who you are now. And or maybe, even more of the benefit of the doubt, be like, that's never who you were. You thought you were that person, but you're not. So, I mean, but that's the thing about people. People are always changing and evolving. And even if he was that person at one point, doesn't necessarily make him that person now. But, at the end of the day, it is up to him. He's the only one that can find the answer of whether or not to find out who he is, Another part of this episode, kind of being the mirror image to that, is obviously the Lila and Diggle situation, which everyone's kind of like getting a little bit of a taste of. We ended up learning a little bit about Dinah and her partner Vinny. It's like, yeah, when they were undercover and everything, obviously there were things that they had to keep secret from each other, not because they wanted to, but because they needed to. And that's kind of something that Felicity, as well as the whole Diggle and Lila situation, kind of bring out. It's like, yeah, you realize there's certain things you just can't tell for, it's not easy. Like in Lila's case, it's like, yeah, you can't necessarily be open about everything you do. It's like, yeah, it's a very morally gray situation. But then she points out, it's like, don't forget the team that you work with is very morally gray. Let's not forget who Oliver was and all the things he's done. Which Diggle's kind of like, yeah, that's different. It's like, actually, it's not. I think what it came down to is like, I think Diggle didn't want Lila. It's like, he has Lila in front of him. He's like, he has this picture perfect picture of who Lila is. The fact of the matter, she's this great woman. She would never do a bad thing or something like that. And he's holding her to such a high standard, which is like, every human makes mistakes and it's flawed. But I'm not saying what she's doing is flawed, but still, like, the fact of the matter is, like, she's like, just like you guys have to skate a gray area, so do I, if it means doing right. It's something that, Diggle was just so... I think it's just more so than anything, he's just unwilling to see Lila like that, to really kind of see things from her point of view. I mean, it kind of gets even more complicated when you have this situation where it's like Lila, later on we see that she actually has one of Curtis's T-spheres. It's not like they recreated, they actually stole one of them and modified it, obviously to make it better and stuff like that. But it was a situation where Lila ended up showing Diggle, it's like, okay, here's the book, this is all the operations that... Argus has ever gone through. It's like the fact, like I said, it comes down to a situation. It might not always be the prettiest way of going about it. Things. It might not be something you always 100% agree with, but the fact of the matter is, much like the whole Felicity and Oliver situation, it's like, I've always had your back, kind of do me the courtesy, it's like, she's like, I'm not Oliver. And I think, like I said, like, I think it's also because he sees what Oliver's going through, and obviously he doesn't want, Diggle doesn't want Felicity or even, Lila to go through the way Oliver's going through things down. It's like, obviously, Oliver's kind of his own case. I mean, it's very mean of me to say it, but like, Oliver's very damaged. His circumstances created him into, like, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances to that. Obviously, there's complexity when it comes to the Felicity as well as the Lila situations, but they're a little less murky as when it comes to the Oliver situation. But it does seem by the end of the episode, like, everyone, like I said, Oliver and Felicity, as well as Diggle and Lila, are kind of mending fences. Because the conversation that came up in the flashbacks is the fact is that, obviously, like, Felicity will always care for Oliver, but the fact of the matter is they can never be together if he's not willing to admit why he keeps so many secrets, kind of finally open up about a lot of stuff, which he kind of does, so... Obviously, it's paving the way to there possibly being more. I mean, I am curious to know what that means going forward, especially with the whole him and Susan thing, which he did end that after the whole, like, I don't know if she's still in the city or not, or maybe she moved away. I mean, I feel like I feel like if she moved away or something like that, they would have referenced it. So, what that just means, too, so... I'm wondering, will the whole Susan situation affect there possibly ever being a him, Oliver, and Felicity again, so. And obviously we end up finding out that basically kind of the final note they kind of end the episode on is we see that Chase has found William. And ends up bringing the fact is, yeah, like, oh yeah, I know your father. So what does it mean going forward? Does this mean he's going to try and put William in the same situation that he was in. He's like, so basically, hey, William, here's your dad. It's like, I'm going to kill your dad in front of you. It's like, basically to get back at Oliver. He's like, I'm going to kill you now, but by doing so, I'm going to kill you in front of your son, and I'm going to end up destroying him and making him just like me. It'll just kind of be like an endless cycle, I guess, in his eyes. It's like, eventually he'll try and come after me, but by then, like, I'll have broken him and made him into what you strive so hard not to be, something that you strive so hard not to admit that you are, the monster that you are, as well as the monster you made me into be, something similar to that. Or maybe he'll do it just to kind of put that one final nail in a coffin to Oliver, kill William, like the last piece of himself, and then finally put Oliver out of his misery. Well, maybe start with William and then proceed to take care of the rest of Team Arrow. And then, when it's all said and done, when he's lost and caught up in despair, then kill him, or at the very least, maybe make him feel like that for the rest of his life. I don't know. Because something, once again, kind of pulling from the other shows, let's not forget about the grim future and, what was it, 2047? William wasn't alive during that whole situation, because obviously that future still exists because of Flashpoint, because of the whole John Jr. situation. So it's like, William wasn't around then. I mean, granted, he might have been somewhere else, but I don't know. It's hard to say. So that might have already set up. The fact is that William might die. I don't know. Like I said, at the very least, he might be sent away, and like Oliver never is able to have that family time with him to be a father like he wanted to. So, I mean, that's just speculation. A very good episode of just kind of like character building and kind of like mending those fences, taking that time to kind of fix things up between the teams so they're not as a word I kind of used in another recording tonight, is like kind of finding a way to kind of stabilize the foundation a little bit more. So, but with these new developments, I'm very interested to see what goes down in the next episode, just how far Adrian's willing to do this whole situation, how far he's willing to go, which, I mean, as we've seen, he's willing to go pretty far. So, I mean, it makes you wonder also, is like Talia completely okay with that type of situation too? Is Artemis too? Like, if it comes down to it, would they be okay with him doing? Like I say, ultimately, I think it's more so than anything. It's like, I don't think it's to kill William or anything like that. I mean, it's more so than anything, it's to cause some turmoil for Oliver, and eventually, like, like I said, as I brought up before, probably use him as an example to turn William into a monster like them. But we'll just have to wait and see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.